After our recent encounter with a UFO, there is another layer to this story, and it also deals with a question that I get asked very frequently since I spoke about my interactions with these beings of blue light, these blue beings as I've called them. And a lot of people said that this craft was probably piloted by humans and it's a human technology. But the synchronistic manner by which it appeared is why I am unable to agree to that. And if you haven't experienced synchronicity, which is the language of God, it is the mystic language of consciousness, it'll be very hard for you to understand, because your state of consciousness, if it's not experiencing synchronicity, is in a much more intellectual five senses position than those of us who move in a different dimension within this routing of this consciousness. And those who have experienced synchronicity will understand when I say it was too synchronistic for me to brush it off as chance that some craft from humans flew over. I've no doubt that humans have technology like that. I'm not saying we don't. We've probably attained things that have landed here or crashed here and mimicked them and copied them, of course. And our military don't tell us everything. We know this. As things get declassified, if you take an interest, it's very evident that we are not told everything. The synchronicity of it, though, leaves me to say it was of another dimension, as well as saying another world. And there are those who are out and out naysayers and say, no, impossible. But if I were to take a spoonful of the ocean and take this spoonful of seawater and say to you, look, there are no fish here. Clearly fish do not exist. This is literally akin to the human experience or the human participation with the five senses in the vastness of the universe. It would be profoundly arrogant for me to take a spoonful of water and say there's no fish in the ocean. And likewise, our five sense experience, which doesn't perceive other light, other dimensions, etc. And in this very small corner of an infinitely massive universe, to say there's no other dimensions and beings within there, it's the height of either ignorance, arrogance, or you have been, unfortunately, which is the case for all of us, programmed by a system to have a certain perception that doesn't allow for it because of certain forces who want you in that disabled state. When I say disabled, I mean the human organism is supposed to commune with other dimensions, and we are trained to live from the perceptions of the vessel, not the soul that animates the vessel, and so we lose track of that. However, there is more to it as well, which I should explain, and since I spoke of my interactions with these beings of blue light, a lot of people around the world have either shared testimonials with me or have reached out and said, who are they? What are they? Well, the day before this happened, I happened across a testimonial, a healing testimonial, and I felt drawn to watch it. And when I watched it, it was a lady who was doing the work in the spirit of healing from Dr. Joe Dispenza. Now, Joe Dispenza uses the term quantum field for that which the ancients pointed at with the word spirit, or the world of spirit, or the spirit realm. You know, our language has changed, but we are pointing at the same thing. It's this dimension beyond our own that we can move into and influence this physicality. And so, I'm going to share that testimonial shortly, but for those of you who haven't seen what happened with myself with these beings of blue light, many years ago in Tanzania, I was engaged in a shamanic on my own via proxy with a shaman that I know, a shamanic drumming meditation. And I was doing so because I'd been attacked physically, metaphysically, spiritually. And as I was in this state, I began to leave my body. And as I left my body, I was in the same location I was, which at the time I was living in the children's village that we've built. And I left the body and I was there and I could see everything as it was, but there was this addition of these many beings that were made of blue light. And they look like humans, but they didn't have facial features. They were just humanoid in shape. And I could see them blowing this blue light, this mist of blue light onto the children. And of course, in our family, there are many sick children who have a lot of struggles, a lot of traumas, and it seemed to be deeply comforting and healing these children. And I never saw them again. And then a few years ago in meditation, I began to shake and they appeared. And they began to interact with me. And what happened in one particular meditation, which I shared publicly, they poked me in my liver and I jumped with pain. And I went with my family to the forest here, and I never asked Fritzi to take my picture, and I stopped us all at this random area and I said, take my picture, and I walked off the path into the forest and insisted Fritzi take my picture. And I happened to be looking up like this, and when we got home, my battery died on the phone. When we got home and switched it on, there was this fantastic blue light which looks exactly like the blue light that these beings are made of. And so this prompted me that it was a feeling now I should publicly share with the world what I'm interacting with and these beings who are helping us. And I did so, and I mentioned the story of poking me in the liver and making me jump in pain. 6 weeks after I posted that video, I began to get a pain in real life in my liver, and then I began to pass stones from my body, and a lot. Over the period of a week, I passed more than 100 stones from my body. And it was very painful. So on the 7th day I went to the hospital. I correlated where I'd been jabbed. It was such a potent experience with this pain and these stones, because I was feeling the pain there. And I went and they did their scans, and the doctor even called his boss. He told me, I've called my boss at home because we are so confused and perplexed. He said, but your body has on its own randomly expelled these stones. And normally we would say you need an operation to take out your gallbladder or whatever, wherever they've come from. But your body's done it on its own. And for us, this is like a mystery. It's like a medical miracle. And of course, I knew it wasn't a medical miracle. It was a miracle of these angelic beings. And so that's what happened with myself and these angelic helpers. When we watched this testimonial, Fritzi went into meditation, and having had less mystic experiences than I, she said, I feel it's time for me to meet these blue beings. I see them helping my husband, and I see them helping this lady that we've just watched. And I'm ready to meet them. And the day she asked that is the day that we had this UFO encounter. And this is what opens up a whole profound box of what ifs, but I want to explore those momentarily, because first I want to share with you a part of the testimonial of this lady who also had an interaction with the beings of blue light, as do many people, as do many, many people.
I was born premature, and I had incontinence from the day I was born. It was 55 years ago, so they didn't really know what to do with babies back then. So my mom would make little tools out of soap and have to dig out, because I was impacted. And so it's really been a lifelong problem, and not one that is really that fun to discuss with people. But for it. By the time and so I knew that I just felt like I was destined to have an interaction with the blue beings. I would say they were divine, angelic. I don't know, whatever people want to say that they were, but I knew that I was destined to have an interaction with them, and I just was really afraid that my analytical mind was so strong that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I was like, I'm not going to eat and I'm not going to sleep very much because Dr. Joe says, that if you're tired and you're goofy, that's when the mystical can happen. So Saturday night, when you get in that room, like the power is so strong in there. And Dr. Joe takes such good care of getting us ready. Like my whole body was vibrating, So we go into the healing. And I'm really like, ooh, like, I don't know, will I be able to, if the blue beings, if they show up, will I be afraid? And so this just shows you how much the divine takes care of us. So I get in there, and right away, like, my body I felt like it was bouncing like a basketball off the ground, and all of a sudden this curtain appeared, and it was like a gold shimmering curtain with diamond flecks in it. And these blue hands come out from behind the curtain, and they start working on me. And I knew that it was because I had fear. And so I said, I surrender. Like, I'm going to surrender. So they came out from the curtain. And I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon where they take somebody by the ankle and they lift them up, and their head is hanging down and all the coins fall out of their pocket. So there were two of them. And they picked me up and they started shaking me. And like, I could not duplicate the positions that my body was in. Literally at one point I was on my tailbone, and my head was all the way back, and my legs were up in the air, and they started pulling what looked like intestines out of my body. And I said to them, are you kidding me? You're going to pull that out of me now in front of all these people? And they, they're very to the point. They said, the people's eyes, or how'd they say, their eyes are closed, you're fine. And they just kept pulling and pulling and pulling him. And it was painful. It was painful because that was stuff that had been in there for a really long time. So then, they threw me onto my right hip. And I was literally balancing on a spot on my hip about that big up in the air. And my arms were, and they started taking a shunt, and they were jabbing it into my kidney. And I said, are you kidding me? What are you doing? That hurts. And they said, your kidneys function slow. And so then they whipped me around like a rag doll, and they did the same thing to the other side. And I'm a marathon runner, so I had been suffering with an encapsulated toe joint that I didn't even think about. And so they said, point your toe as hard as you can. So I pointed my toe as hard as I could, and the energy that was in that toe joint shot up into my calf, and my foot contorted to the side like this. And I don't even know how I did it. I don't know how my ankle bone didn't break. And all the energy went up into my calf. And they reached in and they grabbed it out of there. I mean, and they shook me around a few more times. And, this is like, I don't know how long. It's not that long. And they gave me the once-over, the Blue Man Group once-over. And so I know that the old self died. I know the old self died. And the new person was born. And so, but on the third day, I started to have normal bowel functions. And it's never happened in my life. I have never in my entire life been able to not have incontinence without aid. And since Niagara Falls, no problem. I can eat.
And so, as you will have seen, I am not alone in these experiences. We, and I say we, I mean a vast amount of human beings are having these mystic experiences which correlate to physical changes in the density of matter. The spirit realm shows us and then the matter follows suit, sometimes instantaneously, sometimes after a period of time. And so the question is, who are they? This is what I get asked. And the reality is, I can only say, I have never sought the presence of these beings, the same as I never sought to have a conversation with a negative alien species, higher dimensional force. But they have happened. And they happened because I opened my heart to the presence of God. And my heart was renewed. I was filled with a new love as a man. And in that new love, that presence asked me to manifest certain things in this world, or that presence, the will of that presence, wanted to use this organism to manifest. There was no character in charge of that. There's no John saying, okay, I'll do that for you. The presence takes the vessel. And this is the surrender, you see. But what I can say is that in the presence of these beings of blue light, a great love is felt, which is no different to the love I felt in the presence of God, which my discernment shows me has led me to do things in the world that have helped. And I live under the instruction of what Jesus Christ left for this world. I live by that. I live by it, and I'm strict on myself with it to the best of my capacity. And one of the things I'm strict on is do not fear. And I have no fear of the demonic or the angelic. However, it's very natural to fear these experiences, because even in the Bible, every time an angel appears, they almost always introduce themselves with fear not. Either that, or the writer states they were terrified, like the shepherds at Christ's birth. They were terrified as the angel appeared, etc. It's a very natural response. But to live in fear of mystic experience is to live in a box that you have been put in, arguably by the fallen ones, arguably by the technology of your fallen nature. And in that technology with fear, you can't have discernment. But when you have discernment, you recognize the angelic. You recognize it. And I recognize these beings as angelic. They heal. They love. And at first they were helping me to do the work God had asked this human talking to you to do. And in time, the organism got sick, not my soul, but the organism. And now they help with that. And so the big conundrum for us with our limited minds is, if we move in surrender, we can say they are angelic, and then we have to admit we don't understand the angelic realm. It's a mystery to us. And so we just leave it at that, and we know it's an extension of God, and in that unmistakable state of consciousness that we call faith, that space without fear. Fear is the movement of the mind. I fear the unknown. The unknown is not known. What you fear with your attention is what you think is a possibility of the unknown. You fear the movement of your own thought. The unknown is not something you can fear. You do not know it. You can only fear what you think of it. When that is arrested, that movement of the mind, you are left. What option other than faith? And in that unmistakable state of consciousness, the loving hand of God reaches to our life. And that loving hand can come in the manifestation of these angelic beings of blue light in my life and the life of many others. And I ask questions about this. Look at the ancient faiths, the Hindu faiths. There's so many blue gods there. Even Christian seers have said they see blue angels behind preachers on stage. But the conundrum is now, that Fritzi asked to meet them, and having had very little to no mystic experiences compared to myself, aside from seeing the manifestations in the world predominantly, the day she asks, first thing is a UFO. Were they in that UFO? Do they move interdimensionally? Are they a species? Can't comprehend it. And someday when I'm aligned enough to engage in a deep conversation with them, because their frequency where I meet them is very high. And even when I went to a higher dimension and conversated with this species that doesn't necessarily have our best interests at heart, it was easier to be at that state than to be with the realm of the light where the healing starts, up here. Up here is where the blue beings of light are. Here was where this other beings were, and is where we are. The difference was that this being can't reach that level. You can, and therefore you have dominion over when you reach that level alone. If you stay in the perceptions of the world in entertainment and pleasure, you're under the catchment of the higher negative forces. When the time comes that I learn to be aligned enough, because up to now I disobeyed their instructions and I ignored what they suggested and disobeyed God. They told me how I should walk my path of healing, and I ignored it and went back to Africa to deal with some problems there. And I did so because I'm arrogant. I was told it would be okay, and I'm arrogant, and I thought only I can sort that out. And so I travelled there and I damaged myself again. And so now they have again instructed me, and they work with me, and I'll continue to share about this until I understand exactly what this manifestation of God's love is, who they are. But they work with us, and they're working with me, and I have a clear path of how it should be. And ultimately the healing comes from your connection to that realm of spirit, or the quantum field where they are, perhaps we can call it that. And the more accustomed I get to being in the higher vibration, then hopefully I will have more answers that my human mind can formulate into something. But if you are out there and you say, I want this experience, because of course it's very interesting to see a UFO and to meet these beings of light and have their interactions in the spirit realm manifest in the world around you. It's profoundly interesting. But if you are the sort of person who's moving from entertainment source to pleasure, to going to the pub with your friends, and you want these mystical experiences to fall into your lap like a movie, it's highly unlikely, I feel, that your frequency, your vibration will match there. Because you're living in a state where you're selling your attention instead of giving it to God's Spirit and your growth. You're selling it to corporate interests. You have a corporation funneling entertainment to you, and you're selling your attention to that small matrix within inside the cosmos of creation. There's nothing wrong with that sometimes, but I'm just saying if you are wanting to understand why some are and some are not, it's because some of us have chosen to let go of an identity the world has given us and make our identity in God. And when you make your identity in God and you have that surrender, that energetic rebirth, not a linguistic rebirth where you say, I am reborn, I'm going to live this way, but where your ego passes even momentarily, and the arising that fills that space is the presence of God. There. Right there. Are the humans who have chosen to allow their human vessel and its identity to be the will of God, not the will of a separate personal identity that the world has programmed into it. And those are the humans I meet who have these arisings, who have these helpers. And I'm not saying that other humans aren't privy to the help of God at all. God loves you and the angels support all of us, no matter what we are doing. But what I am saying is that it takes time to see it, to align to it. And if your time you are selling to entertainment and pleasure, then you may not see it and you may not understand it. And so who they are, to me, is angelic. And how you get to know them is to give your life, your identity, to the will of God and the will of unconditioned love. And there, in that faith state of consciousness, you will be born anew. And when you are born anew, the body's senses become free. I've recently said the RAM that's limited in your body is no longer busy running the program of the separate mental identity, the self-image, the ego. And now the senses here now are able to have life revealed to it. And as life is revealed to the senses without it grabbing it and trying to control it or dissect it, there you have enough processing power in the vessel to reach to the higher dimensions and to commune visually or physically with these beings who may be us from a future timeline, who are our angelic helpers, and maybe they travel in a craft interdimensionally. I have no idea. I just know they heal us and they love us. And I know I don't seek them. I seek God. And to live under the instructions that Christ left has brought me to this point. And I hasten to add the instructions Christ left, not the church's interpretations of the instructions Christ left. Christ in Aramaic said he and his disciples were followers of the way. I feel I follow that same way. That was all. God bless, guys.